Some of America's biggest companies gave workers a Christmas cheer Wednesday as they passed on some of their winnings from a dramatic corporate tax cut. AT&T said that it will pay $1,000 bonuses to more than 200,000 employees, and promised to make $1 billion in new investments in the United States next year, once a tax reform bill approved by Congress is signed into law. The Republican-controlled House and Senate have given final approval to the biggest overhaul of the U.S. tax code in 30 years, sending the sweeping bill to President Donald Trump for his signature. As part of that bill, the tax rate on corporations will drop from 35% to 21%. Trump previously called the measure rocket fuel for the economy. After AT&T's announcement, other companies followed suit. Comcast and Universal said it would award $1,000 bonuses to more than 100,000 workers, based on the passage of tax reform and a recent FCC decision to repeal net neutrality rules. The cable and internet giant also boasted that it expects to spend well in excess of $50 billion over the next 5 years investing in infrastructure. Boeing said it would make a $300 million employee-related and charitable investment as a result of #tax reform legislation. And Fifth Third Bancorp in Cincinnati, Ohio said it will pay $1,000 bonuses to more than 13,500 employees and raise the minimum wage for its workforce to $15 per hour because its tax rate is about to plummet. Wells Fargo matched that $15 per hour minimum wage hike and said it was prompted by the tax plan. The San Francisco-based bank also said it would make $400 million in donations to nonprofit charities and other community organizations in 2018. FedEx also showed optimism, with its CFO saying during an earnings call that the package shipping giant will likely expand if the tax cuts lead to larger national economic growth. GDP could increase materially next year as a result of U.S. tax reform. If this occurs, we would likely increase capital expenditures and hiring, Alan Groff told investors. In a victory lap event on the White House's South Lawn, Trump read aloud a news account of the AT&T decision and said more like it are coming. "That's because of what we did," he said. "So that's pretty good." "I mentioned AT&T," he said minutes later, "but many companies have come forward and are saying they're so happy, and they're going to be doing similar announcements." In a letter to employees, AT&T CEO Randall Stephenson said the bonuses would be paid to all union-represented, non-management, and first- and second-line managers. If the president signs the bill before Christmas, employees will receive the bonus over the holidays, the company added. The missive to AT&T's workforce said the new 21% corporate tax rate would put the U.S. in line with the rest of the industrialized world. This new lower rate encourages businesses to invest more in the United States. And more investment creates more good-paying jobs and increases economic growth. Just minutes before AT&T announced its employee bonuses, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer excoriated the company as a greedy corporation that would use its tax cut to buy back its stock and reward its executives. Over the last 10 years, AT&T has paid an average tax rate of 8% a year. They have 80,000 fewer employees today than they had then, the New York Democrat complained. Tax breaks don't lead to job creation. They lead to big CEO salaries and money for the very, very wealthy. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, a California Democrat, said the Republican tax cuts represented the worst bill in the history of the United States Congress. But Trump predicted that an outpouring of domestic investment from American companies would be very special. "We're bringing the entrepreneur back into this country. We're getting rid of the knots and all the ties and you're going to see what happens," he said. And ultimately what does it mean? It means jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. AT&T is involved in a takeover attempt of Time Warner, the parent company of CNN, which has put them at odds with Trump's Justice Department. The DOJ is opposing it on competition grounds, and the case is set to make its way to court. AT&T's rapid praise for the president may well be seen as a gesture intended to soften Trump's opposition to the merger. But on the South Lawn the merger was not mentioned amid jubilation at the first major legislative achievement of the Trump presidency. "We are making America great again," Trump said at the outdoor ceremony. Vice President Mike Pence, who was up late last night presiding over the final vote in the Senate, declared the bill's passage a middle-class miracle and shouted, "Merry Christmas, America." GOP leaders congratulated Trump on the legislative achievement, the first major one of his presidency, one by one in remarks that praised him as the greatest executive office holder in decades. "Something this big, something this generational, something this profound could not have been done without exquisite presidential leadership. Mr. President, "Thank you for getting us over the finish line," said House Speaker Paul Ryan. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell likewise said, "America is going to start growing again. Thank you, Mr. President, for all you're doing. But for your leadership, we would not be here today," House Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady piled on. Representative Kevin McCarthy, the House Majority Leader, at his turn said, "This is a big day for America. This is America's comeback. Come February, check your check, because that will be the pay raise of the vote for Donald Trump," McCarthy stated. Senator Orrin Hatch, the Senate Finance Chairman, effusively said that Trump was one heck of a leader and the bill could not have passed without you. "We are making headway. This is just the beginning," the Utah senator who has not declared his intent to run for re-election next year said. "I just hope that we all get behind him every way we can and we'll get this country turned around in ways that will benefit the whole world." Hatch said, "We are going to make this the greatest presidency that we've seen not only in generations but maybe ever. God bless all of you." The president told lawmakers in his remarks that the negotiation process has been an amazing experience, and Republicans have now broke every record with the size of tax slash. Are you a winner or a loser? How the Trump tax cut legislation affects average Americans. A standard selling point for the GOP's tax overhaul plan is that middle-class Americans will get a big tax cut and see their wages go up because of a slash on the rate paid by corporations. Republicans are doubling the standard deduction and the child tax credit, lowering tax rates across the board until 2025 and giving businesses a permanent break to spur job creation. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said Sunday on CNN that a two-parent family with 2 children making $75,000 would keep $2,000 more a year and a family of 4 with a combined salary of $150,000 would get twice that. "It's going to be one of the great Christmas gifts to middle-income people," President Donald Trump on Saturday said. The Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center found that taxes would fall for all income groups on average in 2018, increasing overall average after-tax income by 2.2%. In general, tax cuts as a percentage of after-tax income would be larger for higher income groups, with the largest cuts as a share of income going to taxpayers in the 95th to 99th percentiles of the income distribution. But the bill creates some problems too. An estimated 13 million Americans are projected to lose health insurance. Commuters will no longer receive a perk that has saved them money. Some residents of high-tax states like New York, New Jersey and California will pay more because of a change to the state and local tax deduction. And millions of American households could face tax hikes in coming years. That's because their new tax breaks are set to expire within the next decade. Their taxes could also creep up because the IRS has been directed to use a less generous gauge of inflation in adjusting tax brackets. Republican lawmakers have sold their far-reaching legislation as benefiting everyone in the long run because, they argue, it will speed up economic growth. Yet, most economists say that any boost in growth would be modest in the long term. And most argue that at least some of the tax benefits will be undermined by the much higher budget deficits that help pay for them. Most Americans would receive tax cuts initially. By raising the standard deduction to $12,000 for individuals and $24,000 for joint filers, Americans who choose not to itemize will pay no taxes on income up to that amount. An increase in the child tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000, of which $1,400 is refundable, is another major middle-class benefit. But lower income tax rates and a host of other benefits would expire after 2025. This effectively sets up an $83 billion tax hike for many millions of Americans in 2027 unless Congress renews the cuts. And the impact of income taxes could continue to inch up because the plan will adjust the tax brackets at a less generous measure of inflation than it formerly did. Some other tax winners. The Trump Organization, at least temporarily, companies with profits that double as the owner's personal income would enjoy a substantial tax break. Consider the Trump Organization. It consists of about 500 such pass-through entities, according to the president's lawyers. Rather than pay the top rate of nearly 40%, Trump would likely be taxed on these profits at closer to 30%. The Trump tax brackets. Single filers. $0 to $9,525 to 10%. $9,525 to $38,700 to 12%. $38,700 to $82,500 to 22%. $82,500 to $157,500 to 24%. $157,500 to $200,000 to 32%. $200,000 to $500,000 to 35%. $500,000 and up -37%. Married couples who file jointly. $0 to $19,050 to 10%. $19,050 to $77,400 to 12%. $77,400 to $165,000 to 22%. $165,000 to $315,000 to 24%. $315,000 to $400,000 to 32%. $400,000 to $600,000 to 35%. $600,000 and up -37%. The final bill also appears to specifically benefit the real estate sector, the bedrock of the Trump family's wealth, with benefits extended to pass-throughs that own buildings but don't pay wages to workers. The president's family didn't receive every possible benefit. The estate tax on inheritances, for example, will stay in place, though it will apply only to the portion of a family's estate that exceeds $11 million, twice the previous level, at least through 2025. And the alternative minimum tax, which is intended to prevent the wealthy from exploiting loopholes to avoid taxes, would stay in place as well, though its higher thresholds would also be temporary. Energy drillers, it's no longer off-limits to drill in Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge for oil and natural gas. President Barack Obama had sought to protect the 19.6 million acres, a home for polar bears, caribou, migratory birds and other wildlife. But under the Republicans' tax plan, fossil fuel companies could tap into oil and gas reserves. Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski and other Republicans insist that drilling can be done safely with new technology while ensuring a steady energy supply for West Coast refineries. And some tax losers. Sports teams. Major sports teams will still be able to build and renovate their stadiums with tax-exempt municipal bonds. The House version of the tax bill had initially scrapped access to this form of debt by sports teams, a provision that drew objections from the NFL. But the final bill retains it. Such tax-advantaged public financing should make it easier to have the Oakland Raiders, for example, move to Las Vegas and play in a new $1.9 billion dome. Forbes estimates the Raiders, owned by Mark Davis, to be worth $2.4 billion. Major corporations, the tax rate for most companies would drop to 21% from 35%. This is a permanent rate cut, which, along with a shift to a lower rate on some foreign earnings, could help boost corporate profits. Not surprisingly, the stock market has soared in part over anticipation of these lower corporate taxes. The Standard & Poor's 500 stock index has jumped nearly 24% since Trump's election last year. Tax lawyers, rather than close loopholes, the tax bill appears to create more of them. Tax lawyers and accountants will likely be besieged by clients looking for professional guidance in restructuring companies and incomes to avoid taxes. In fact, tax experts and lawyers who reviewed a prior version of the tax bill outlined a slew of loopholes in a 35-page report in which it warned that the bill would allow new tax games and planning opportunities for well-advised taxpayers. Some tax losers. The uninsured. The tax bill removes a penalty that was charged to people without health insurance as required by Obama's 2010 health insurance law as a way to hold costs down for everyone. By eliminating this mandate, the tax bill will likely deprive 13 million people of insurance, according to estimates by the Congressional Budget Office. The repeal of the health insurance mandate will help preserve revenue to pay for the tax cuts. The government would no longer have to subsidize as many low-income people receiving insurance. This change would generate $314.1 billion over 10 years, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. Commuters, it could get more expensive to ride the subway or park your car near work. Employers would no longer be able to deduct from their taxes the cost of providing parking or transit passes worth up to $255 a month to workers. Bicycle commuters would also lose their benefit from companies. Technically, companies could still offer this benefit. But under the tax bill, they will lose the financial incentive to do so. Such a change could have the effect of reducing ridership on public transit and possibly increase costs for riders on rail and bus systems. Homeowners in high-tax states. The bill imposes a $10,000 cap on taxpayers who deduct their state, local and property taxes, and the cap isn't adjusted for inflation. Currently, there is no limit on how much in state and local taxes you can deduct. Some Republican lawmakers in such high-tax states such as California and New York voted against the bill because their constituents' taxes could increase as a result of the provision, but the measure still passed. Taxpayers after 2025, Most Americans would receive tax cuts initially. But the lower rates and a host of other benefits would expire after 2025. This effectively sets up an $83 billion tax hike for many millions of Americans in 2027. More than half of taxpayers would pay more in taxes that year, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center. What's more, people's taxes could continue to creep up because the plan will adjust the tax brackets at a less generous measure of inflation than it formerly did. The slower indexing for inflation amounts to a $400 billion tax hike between 2028 and 2037 that would help finance the lower corporate rates, Lily Batchelder, a New York University law professor and former Obama White House advisor, observed on Twitter. Congress